The ancient cry for help traveled across the vastness of space for over 3 decades. The Galendri, a species with blue crystalline skin that reflected the light of their dying sun, had exhausted every option as they watched their star swell ominously each cycle. Their astronomers had calculated with grim precision. Within 6 months, their homeworld would be engulfed in plasma. Their children would never again climb the floating mountains or swim in the silver lakes of their ancestral home. The message was simple, translated into 12 major galactic languages. Our star dies. Our people need sanctuary. Resources offered in exchange. Please respond. Day after day, the automated system sent the plea into the void. The Galendri were not a powerful race, but they were respected for their medical knowledge and botanical innovations. Surely someone would answer. The Ktheri Confederation received the message first. Their high command reviewed the data, calculated the resource expenditure versus potential gain, and filed the request as economically unfeasible. The Voltsin Empire intercepted it next, determined the Galendri had nothing of military value to offer, and quietly deleted the transmission from their records. 16 more advanced civilizations received the distress call. All concluded that the massive undertaking of relocating an entire species wasn't worth the effort. Some sent polite refusals. Most simply ignored it. The Galactic Council, a loose alliance of the 22 most advanced species, briefly discussed the matter during their centennial assembly. The official record stated only, petition denied due to non-interference principles and resource allocation concerns. That should have been the end. The Galendri would join the ranks of extinct species, remembered only in database entries. But 36 years after the first transmission, the human exploration vessel Dauntless picked up the signal during routine communication, sweeps near the edge of charted space. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 years earlier. Their application to join the Galactic Council remained under review. Commander Park Ji-ho sat alone in his quarters, replaying the message for the 4th time. At 42, Park had the weathered face of someone who had seen too much vacuum and not enough atmosphere. His dark eyes remained fixed on the holographic representation of the Galendri star system as he sipped his cooling coffee. The door chimed. "Enter," Park called, not looking away from the projection. Lieutenant Kim Hannah stepped inside, her uniform crisp despite being 16 hours into her shift. At 34, she served as both tactical officer and diplomatic liaison for the Dauntless. "You're still reviewing that distress call?" Kim asked, though the answer was obvious. Park nodded. "I've cross-referenced with our stellar databases. Their sun is showing classic signs of premature expansion. The Galendri calculations appear correct, maybe even optimistic." Kim frowned. "I've already contacted Earth Command about it. They reminded me that we received explicit instructions from the Council about interfering in situations they've already ruled on." "And when did we receive this ruling?" Park's voice was dangerously quiet. "It was included in the diplomatic packet we received at Outpost 7. The Council formally denied assistance 3 years ago. The Galendri case is considered closed." Park stood up suddenly, causing Kim to step back. 3 years ago, while these people are still broadcasting for help, did anyone bother to tell them they've been abandoned? Kim's expression tightened. "Commander, I understand your frustration, but this is precisely why the Council remains cautious about human involvement in galactic affairs. Our emotional responses to situations. Our humanity, you mean?" Park walked to the small viewport, staring at the distant stars. "I studied the Council races, Hana. Their histories. Most haven't faced an existential threat in thousands of years. They've forgotten what it means to be truly afraid." Earth Command was clear, "Sir. We're not authorized to intervene. The Council specifically warned humans about our tendency toward emotional decision-making." Park turned from the viewport, his decision already made. "Calculate how long it would take us to reach the Galendri system at maximum safe speed." Kim hesitated. "Sir, I must formally note my objection." "Duly noted, Lieutenant." The calculation. please. Kim's shoulders dropped slightly. At maximum sustainable drive output, approximately 18 days. And how long until their sun reaches critical expansion? Based on their data and our own analysis, roughly 5 months. Park nodded. Convene the senior staff in the command center in 30 minutes. We have planning to do. Commander, Kim tried one more time. We risk our standing with the Council. Earth Command will not support this. Park's expression hardened as he looked at his tactical officer. Then let them witness what our emotions can accomplish. Maybe they'll learn something. 30 minutes later, the 7 senior officers of the Dauntless gathered around the situation table. The holographic display showed the Galactic system in alarming detail, their sun's unstable corona flaring unpredictably. We all know why we're here, Park began. The Galactic face extinction within months. They've been asking for help for over 30 years. Chief Engineer Ba Sung-min raised his hand. Commander, I've reviewed their planetary specs. Their atmosphere is methane-based, gravity approximately 1.3 times Earth standard. We can't simply relocate them to any human colony. Dr. Kang My-suk, the ship's xenobiologist, nodded. And their biology is silicon-based. They require very specific environmental conditions to survive. Which is precisely why no one wants to help them, Park said. It's too much work. Navigation Officer Choi Da-hyun cleared his throat. There's also the matter of our mission parameters. We're supposed to be mapping the Cetus spiral for potential colony sites, not conducting rescue operations. Park looked at each officer in turn. I understand the concerns. I'm not suggesting we can save them alone, but we can be the first to actually respond, to assess the situation properly and coordinate a larger response. From whom? Kim asked skeptically. Earth Command already indicated they won't support this. From humanity, Park replied simply, not just Earth Command. There are independent colonies, corporate mining operations, research outposts. We're not as organized as the Council races, but we're everywhere. Security Chief Jang Hyunwoo, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. You're proposing we go against both Earth Command and the Galactic Council to help aliens we've never met. I'm proposing we answer a call for help that no one else will, Park corrected. I'm not ordering anyone to follow me into this. I'll log it as my decision alone. The room fell silent. The soft hum of the ship's systems seemed louder than before. Finally, Dr. Kang spoke. My mother was a refugee from the Southeast Asian floods of 2097. No one wanted to take in millions of displaced people then, either. Too complicated. Too expensive. She looked directly at Park. I'm with you, Commander. One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Only Kim remained hesitant. Lieutenant, Park said quietly, I need my tactical officer, but I won't hold it against you if you feel you can't participate. Kim took a deep breath. My concerns remain on record, Commander. But if we're doing this, then we do it right. She activated her console. I've already begun plotting optimal approach vectors that avoid Council monitoring stations. Park allowed himself a small smile. Set course for the Galactic system. Maximum sustainable speed. And let's prepare a proper response to their message. They've waited long enough to hear that someone is coming. As the Dauntless altered course, accelerating toward a dying star and a desperate people, Park looked out at the endless stars. The Council called humans angry, emotional, unpredictable. Perhaps they were right. But sometimes, anger was exactly what the universe needed. The Dauntless dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Galactic system. The crew fell silent as the main viewscreen displayed their sun, angry red, swollen far beyond its natural size, with massive solar flares arcing millions of kilometers into space. Life signs, Commander Park asked, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Science Officer Moon Jin-ho checked his readings. Confirmed. The fourth planet still shows significant population centers, approximately 8 million individuals based on thermal patterns. Park nodded grimly. Open a channel using the translation matrix we developed. The communications officer worked quickly. Channel open. Sir. Park straightened his uniform and stepped forward. This is Commander Park Jiho of the Earth vessel Dauntless. We received your distress call. We are here to help. For nearly a full minute, there was no response. Then the screen flickered, showing a being unlike anything the humans had seen before. The Galendry had a crystalline blue-tinted exoskeleton that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Multiple eyes arranged in a circle around what appeared to be a head swiveled independently. When it spoke, light patterns flashed across its surface. This is High Elder Toll of the Galendry Council. Your message is unexpected. We believed our calls went unanswered. Park's expression remained steady. We only received your signal recently. We came as quickly as possible. The Galendry's light patterns shifted to a deeper blue. You are humans from the planet Earth. Yes, we want to help coordinate evacuation efforts for your people. The aliens' patterns flickered rapidly, their equivalent of agitation. We were informed by Galactic Council representatives that humans were a primitive species, dangerous, unpredictable, that we should avoid contact. Several crew members exchanged glances, but Park remained focused. We would appreciate the opportunity to prove otherwise. With your permission, we'd like to send a shuttle to meet with your leadership. After a brief consultation with others off-screen, Elder Toll responded, Approach coordinates are being transmitted. We will receive your delegation. 6 hours later, Park led a small team to the surface of the Galendry homeworld. The shuttle landed on a crystalline platform floating above a city built into interconnected spires. The air was thick with methane, toxic to humans, so the team wore environmental suits with transparent helmets. As they exited the shuttle, Park was struck by the beauty of the alien world. Despite the looming death of their star, the Galendry had maintained their cities with care. Everything seemed to be built of the same crystal-like material as their bodies, reflecting the angry light of their dying sun in mesmerizing patterns. A delegation of 7 Galendry waited for them. Elder Toll stood at the center, taller than the others, with more complex light patterns flowing across their exoskeleton. Welcome to Galendra, Toll said through the translator. Though I fear you have arrived only to witness its end. Park stepped forward and offered a slight bow. We hope to prevent that end. Elder Toll, our ship has begun preliminary scans of your world and population centers. We want to discuss evacuation options. The Galendry led them to a chamber inside the nearest spire. The room was filled with what looked like liquid crystal, flowing up the walls in defiance of gravity. When they were all seated, humans awkwardly balancing on curved surfaces designed for very different bodies, Elder Toll spoke directly. 22 advanced civilizations received our distress call. 7 sent formal refusals. The rest didn't respond at all. The Galactic Council informed us 3 years ago that intervention was not possible within established protocols. Yet you, a species we were warned against, came anyway. Why? Park considered his words carefully. On our world, we have a concept called the duty to rescue. If someone is in danger and you can help, you must try. It's that simple. The council representatives called this emotional decision-making. They said it makes humans unpredictable and dangerous. Park smiled. Sometimes compassion looks like impulsiveness to those who've forgotten how to feel. The lights across Elder Toll's body shifted to a warm amber color. We have only 144 days before our world becomes uninhabitable. Our scientists calculate complete stellar engulfment in 168 days. Engineer Lee Tawu, who had been quietly studying data on his tablet, looked up. That matches our calculations. May I ask about your evacuation resources? The next hours were spent in intense discussion. The Galendry had built evacuation ships, but nowhere near enough for their population. They had no colonies on other worlds. Their species had evolved and remained on their homeworld throughout their history. We can transport perhaps 1 million of our people, Elder Toll admitted. We've been constructing ships for 30 years, but resources are limited, and our star's deterioration accelerated beyond predictions. Lee studied the Galendry ship schematics with growing excitement. Your ship designs are remarkable. The energy efficiency is beyond anything we've achieved. But the life support systems are designed specifically for our biology. Finished another Galendry, introduced as Chief Engineer Zell. They cannot support other species, but they're modular, Lee pointed out. If we could adapt some of our technology to your framework, we might be able to increase capacity by reconfiguring the internal space. Park watched as Lee and Zell quickly fell into technical discussion, their mutual enthusiasm for engineering transcending their biological differences. This was what humans did best, found solutions where others saw only problems. 3 days later, the Dauntless detected new ships entering the system. 2 sleek vessels of clearly non-human design dropped out of hyperspace and established orbit far from both the planet and the human ship. "We're being hailed," announced Communications Officer Shin Du-yun. The screen displayed a humanoid figure with gray skin and large, pupilless eyes. "This is Observer Nilix of the Galactic Council. Human vessel, you are operating in violation of Council Directive 5529C regarding non-interference in the Galendry situation." Park straightened. "Observer Nilix, we are responding to a distress call from a species facing extinction. We recognize no directive that forbids rendering aid. Your assistance was not requested by the Council. Your presence complicates an already documented situation." Park's eyes narrowed. "Documented? You mean you're here to watch them die?" The observer's expression didn't change. "We are here to record the natural conclusion of this unfortunate stellar event for scientific purposes. The Council has already determined that large-scale intervention is not justified by..." "By what?" Park interrupted. "Cost-benefit analysis. Political convenience. By established protocols," Nilix finished coldly. "We will be monitoring your activities. Any attempts to circumvent Council authority will be reported." After the transmission ended, Lieutenant Kim approached Park. "They're going to make this difficult." "They already have," Park replied. "But they're also here because they're curious. They want to see what the unpredictable humans will do." On the planet's surface, work continued at a feverish pace. Lee Ta-Wu and his engineering team worked alongside their Galendry counterparts, adapting human shuttle designs to work with Galendry technology. The goal was to maximize every cubic meter of their evacuation fleet. "If we remove these coolant chambers and replace them with our compact systems," Lee explained to a group of Galendry engineers, "we can fit 20 more suspension pods in each vessel." Chief Engineer Zell's light patterns brightened with excitement. "And if we implement the human power distribution system, we can reduce the engine housing by 18%. The Council observers eventually landed their own shuttle, ostensibly to document the situation. They watched with barely concealed surprise as humans and Galendry worked together seamlessly. "We understood humans to be chaotic and disorganized," one observer commented to Dr. Kang, who was cataloging Galendry biological samples. "Only when we want to be," she replied without looking up from her work. 2 weeks into the mission, Commander Park received a message from Earth Command. Their unauthorized diversion had been noted. They were ordered to return immediately. Park gathered his senior staff. "I won't order anyone to continue. Earth Command has made their position clear. Anyone who wishes to return with the shuttle tomorrow can do so without penalty. I'll take full responsibility." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, Chief Engineer Lee stood. "The Galendry ships need at least another month of modifications. I should stay to oversee that." Dr. Kang nodded. "I'm still documenting their biology to ensure proper life support during evacuation. My work isn't finished." One by one, every officer chose to stay. When Park returned to the surface, Elder Toll was waiting. "Your Council observers informed us that your government has ordered your departure." Park smiled slightly. "Then it seems both our peoples have learned not to always listen to authority." Toll's light patterns shifted to a color Park hadn't seen before, a deep purple that seemed to pulse with emotion. When we first heard of humans, we were told of your anger, your impulsiveness, your disregard for established order. Now we understand these are not flaws. They are why you are here when no one else would come. As the red giant sun flared ominously on the horizon, humans and Galendry continued their work, racing against time while Council observers watched with growing fascination. What they had expected to be a simple documentation of a species' extinction was becoming something entirely different, something that might force the galaxy to reconsider its understanding of the angry, emotional humans. The warning sirens blared across the Galendry city as the sky turned an unnatural crimson. Commander Park rushed to the command center they had established in the Crystal Spire, where Science Officer Moon was already reviewing data with growing alarm. The solar activity has increased by 300% in the last 6 hours, Moon reported, his fingers flying across the holographic display. A massive prominence has formed on the star's eastern limb. Park studied the readings with a sinking feeling. How bad? Bad. Very bad. Moon pulled up a simulation showing the dying star's accelerating decay. The prominence will likely detach within 36 hours, causing a solar flare unlike anything we've recorded. When it hits the planet, he didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room understood the implications. How much does this change our timeline? Park asked. Moon's expression was grim. What was 4 months of relative safety is now, perhaps 5 days before radiation levels become lethal. Complete planetary destruction still some weeks away, but no one will be alive to see it, Park finished. Elder Toll and the Galendry Council entered the command center, their crystalline bodies reflecting the emergency lights in fractured patterns. Even without understanding human facial expressions, they could sense the tension. You have news, Toll stated rather than asked. Park nodded and gestured to the display. Your sun is destabilizing faster than predicted. A massive solar flare will hit your planet in approximately 36 hours. The radiation alone will be, he hesitated, fatal. Elder Toll finished. How quickly must we evacuate? 5 days, at most. The light patterns across the Galendry Council members flashed in what Park had come to recognize as their expression of distress. They had been planning for a carefully organized evacuation over several months. Now they had less than a week. It's not possible, said Council Member Rez, the Galendry in charge of evacuation logistics. Even with the modifications to our ships, we can only move perhaps 50,000 people per day. Park did the mental calculation. That's only 250,000 people in 5 days, out of 8 million. The room fell silent as the impossible math hung in the air. We need to push the Dauntless beyond safety protocols, Park finally announced. If we reroute power from all non-essential systems, we can expand our shield bubble to protect more of the planet during the initial flare. Chief Engineer Lee looked alarmed. The shields aren't designed for that kind of projection. We'd be running the reactors at 200% capacity. Can it be done? Lee hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Theoretically, but maintaining such a shield would put enormous strain on our systems, and the radiation leakage inside the ship would still be significant. Medical Officer Yoon Jae-yun immediately objected. The radiation levels will be dangerous for extended exposure. Even with anti-rad meds, the crew would suffer severe cellular damage after just 12 hours. Then we work in shorter shifts, Park replied firmly. Rotate personnel every 4 hours. No one gets left behind. Back aboard the Dauntless, the crew worked frantically to implement Park's plan. Engineering teams rerouted power conduits, while medical staff prepared radiation treatments and set up additional shielding around critical areas of the ship. The Council observation vessel maintained its position at the edge of the system, periodically sending requests for updates that carried an unmistakable tone of skepticism. They were watching, waiting for the humans to fail or flee. Lieutenant Kim found Park in his quarters, reviewing evacuation scenarios. "Commander, I just received another message from the Council observers. They're requesting permission to interview you about your final plans." Park looked up with a tired smile. "Final plans? They really expect us to give up." "They calculated the odds of success at less than 8%, Kim said, "based on known physics and engineering limitations." "Then we'll have to exceed limitations." Park set down his tablet. "How's morale?" "Surprisingly good. The crew knows the risks, but no one has asked to withdraw." Kim hesitated. "There's something else. I've been monitoring communications in nearby systems. 3 independent human ships have responded to our updates. They're diverting to assist." Park's eyebrows rose. "Without orders, without authorization. Apparently your defiance of Earth Command has inspired others. The research vessel Horizon and 2 mining ships, the Prospector and Deep Drill, are en route. They should arrive within 48 hours. A small smile formed on Park's exhausted face. Not enough to evacuate everyone, but every ship helps. 26 hours later, the massive solar flare detached from the star's surface. From the dauntless bridge, the crew watched in horrified fascination as the wall of plasma, large enough to engulf Earth's moon, hurled toward the Galactic homeworld. "Shield extension ready," reported Engineer Lee, his face slick with sweat despite the environmental controls. "But Commander, once we activate, we'll have no more than 16 hours before critical systems start failing." "Understood. Medical team standing by." Dr. Yoon nodded. "All personnel have received maximum safe dosage of radiation blockers. Rotation schedules are set." Park took a deep breath and gave the order. "Extend shields." The Dauntless shuddered as its shields, designed to protect a single vessel, stretched outward to cover a portion of the planet below. On the main screen, the bubble of energy appeared impossibly thin against the approaching wall of stellar fire. Flare impact in 3, 2, 1. The ship rocked violently as the plasma waves struck the shields. Warning alarms blared from every console. "Shield integrity at 72% and dropping," called out the tactical officer. "Divert emergency power," Park ordered. "Status of the protected zone." "Holding." Moon confirmed. The northern continent remained shielded. Radiation levels elevated but survivable. Below, in the crystal cities of the Galactic, millions watched as the sky burned everywhere except a circular patch above their capital. Within this protected zone, thousands of crystalline beings rushed toward evacuation ships, following the carefully orchestrated plan developed by human and Galactic coordinators. On the Council observation vessel, the aliens watched with growing disbelief as the human ship maintained its impossible shield. "Their power output exceeds design specifications by 187%, reported one observer. "Shield projection at this scale should not be possible with their technology." Observer Nelix stared at the readings. "They cannot maintain it. Laws of physics cannot be overcome by determination." Yet hour after hour, the Dauntless held its position. Inside the ship, crew members staggered to and from their posts, many visibly ill from radiation exposure despite protective measures. In the medical bay, Dr. Yoon and her team worked nonstop, administering treatments and monitoring radiation levels. "How much longer can we maintain the shield?" Park asked, his own face pale and drawn after 12 hours. Engineer Lee checked the increasingly unstable readings. 2 hours, maybe 3 before catastrophic reactor failure. "We're losing containment on the secondary coolant systems." "And the evacuation?" "First wave complete," reported Lieutenant Kim. "Approximately 60,000 Galactic safely aboard their vessels and moving to minimum safe distance. Second wave loading now." It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But it was more than would have survived without intervention. At hour 14, with shield integrity failing and radiation alarms blaring throughout the ship, the sensors detected new arrivals in the system. 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace, announced the tactical officer, unable to hide her excitement. "Human signatures confirmed. It's the Horizon, Prospector, and deep drill. Almost simultaneously, Elder Toll's voice came through the communication system. Commander Park, our long-range sensors detect additional vessels approaching. They appear to be human. The research vessel Horizon moved immediately into position alongside the Dauntless, extending its own shields to reinforce the failing protection. Captain Ryu of the Horizon appeared on the view screen, her face showing equal parts concern and determination. "Looks like you could use some help, Commander," she said. "We've brought medical supplies and evacuation capacity for approximately 20,000. The mining vessels positioned themselves on the far side of the planet, their industrial shields, designed to protect against asteroid debris, now repurposed to shield evacuation zones. From the Council observation vessel, Observer Nelix watched in silence. His species prided themselves on logical analysis and emotional control, yet he found himself experiencing something akin to confusion, awe. "They were not ordered to come," he said quietly to his colleagues. Each captain made this decision independently, risking their vessels and crews. "Emotional decision-making," another observer noted. As expected, Nelix wasn't so sure anymore. What he was witnessing didn't match their understanding of human behavior. This wasn't chaos or impulsiveness. It was something else, something his species might have forgotten long ago. As the 4 human ships held their positions against the solar storm, more evacuation vessels rose from the surface of the dying world. The Galendry worked alongside human coordinators, prioritizing children and those carrying cultural knowledge. In the dauntless medical bay, Dr. Yoon treated Engineer Lee for severe radiation exposure. "You should be relieved of duty," she told him sternly. Lee struggled to sit up. "The primary coolant system is failing. No one else understands the bypass procedure I designed. You'll die if you go back in there." Lee managed a weak smile. "Then I better work quickly." Across the ship, similar scenes played out as crew members pushed beyond their physical limits, driven by the knowledge that every minute they maintained their position meant more lives saved. Commander Park, himself struggling with radiation sickness, opened a channel to the Council observation vessel. "Observer Nilix, we could use your assistance. Your ship's medical facilities are superior to ours." There was a long pause before Nilix responded. "Our directive is to observe, not intervene." "I'm not asking you to evacuate anyone," Park said, his voice steady despite his condition. "Just to treat those suffering from radiation exposure so they can continue their work." Another long pause. "Then, we will prepare our medical bay to receive human patients." It wasn't a full intervention, but it was a first crack in the Council's policy of non-interference. As the hours passed and more Galendry reached safety, even the most logical observers couldn't deny the evidence before them. The angry, emotional humans were accomplishing the impossible, not through superior technology or resources, but through something the Council species had perhaps forgotten: the absolute refusal to accept defeat when lives hung in the balance. Day 6 of the evacuation brought both hope and despair. The shields provided by the human vessels had allowed nearly 300,000 Galendry to escape on their own ships. But with 14 million still remaining and radiation levels rising beyond sustainable levels, the situation remained dire. Commander Park sat in the dauntless engineering section, surrounded by damaged equipment and the smell of burnt circuitry. Chief Engineer Lee lay in medical bay, his condition critical after manually venting a radiation leak that would have killed dozens. "Status report," Park said, his voice hoarse from the metallic dust filling the air despite filtration systems. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her tablet, dark circles under her eyes. "Bad news first. Primary engines are failing. The power coupling modifications we made to extend the shields have melted most of the regulator systems." Park nodded, having expected this. "And the good news? The 4 human ships have managed to evacuate another 18,000 Galendry in the past 12 hours. It wasn't enough. At this rate, they would save perhaps 500,000 of the Galendry population before radiation levels became universally fatal. The dying star continued its violent expansion, each flare worse than the last. Park stood slowly, fighting the dizziness that came with his own radiation exposure. "We need more ships." The Council observers. "No," Park interrupted. "They'll help with medical treatment, but they won't violate their non-interference directive beyond that. We need our own people." Kim frowned. "Commander, Earth Command has explicitly denied further assistance. They've already threatened court-martial for all officers involved." Park walked to the small viewport, looking at the red giant that dominated the sky. The Galactic homeworld, once beautiful with its crystal cities and floating mountains, now lay half in shadow, half in blinding crimson light. What about non-military vessels? Independent operators? Corporate ships? There are some in adjacent sectors, but without official sanction. Kim trailed off. Park turned back to face her, his expression resolute. "Prepare a general distress call. Direct broadcast on all human emergency frequencies." The bridge crew fell silent. What Park was suggesting went beyond disobeying orders. He was asking other captains, many civilians with no military obligation, to risk everything. "Sir," the communications officer said hesitantly, "that would be heard by every human vessel within 3 light years, regardless of affiliation." "Exactly." Park nodded. "Draft the message. Keep it simple. Tell them exactly what's happening here and what we need." 2 hours later, Park reviewed the final message. The bridge crew watched nervously as he made a few corrections and then looked up. "Send it." The message went out across the stars, a desperate call from one group of humans to any others who might be listening. "This is Commander Park Ji-ho of Earth Vessel Dauntless. We are attempting to evacuate the Galactic people before their sun destroys their world. 8 million lives remain at risk. We need ships, supplies, and personnel. Official assistance has been denied. We ask for your help not as military or government representatives, but as humans who cannot stand by while others perish. Coordinates and radiation warnings attached. Any aid will be gratefully received." On the Council observation vessel, alarm spread quickly when they detected the broadcast. "The humans are requesting unauthorized intervention." Observer Nilix reported to his superiors via subspace communication. "They are attempting to circumvent official channels." The response came swiftly. "Monitor all communications. Document this breach of protocol. Take no action to interfere." For the next 12 hours, there was no response to the Dauntless's call. Park continued coordination efforts with the 4 human ships already present, but morale began to falter. The Galactic evacuation ships worked tirelessly, but with each passing hour, the radiation levels rose. Elder Toll met with Park in what remained of the Crystal Council chamber. Most of the beautiful structures had been dismantled to provide materials for radiation shielding. "My people speak of your efforts with great admiration," Toll said, light patterns flowing slowly across his crystalline body. "Even if we cannot save everyone, you have given us hope when all others abandoned us to our fate." Park shook his head. "It's not enough. I promised we would." He was interrupted by his communication device beeping urgently. "Park here." "Commander." Kim's voice came through, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. "We're detecting a hyperspace entry point forming at the system edge. The Council sending reinforcements to stop us?" Park asked grimly. "No, sir. It's a human signature. Commercial registry." Park and Elder Toll rushed to the makeshift command center just as the view screen displayed a large cargo ship dropping out of hyperspace. It was an older model with visible retrofits and patches, clearly not a military or government vessel. "We're being hailed," the communications officer reported. The screen flickered to show a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a captain's insignia on his worn jacket. "This is Captain Song Min-ho of the independent merchant vessel New Seoul. We picked up your distress call while making the supply run to Proxima colonies." Park stepped forward. "Captain Song, we appreciate your response, but I should warn you, this mission has been deemed unauthorized by Earth Command." Assisting us could result in penalties. Song's face broke into a wry smile. Wouldn't be the first time I've been on the wrong side of regulations, Commander. We've got room for approximately 3,000 passengers with the cargo holds converted. We've also brought medical supplies and radiation shielding materials. Just tell us where you need us. Before Park could respond, another alert sounded. Second hyperspace signature detected. Third, fourth. Commander, we have multiple vessels incoming. Over the next 18 hours, 14 human ships arrived in the Galactic system. They came from everywhere. Research vessels diverted from scientific missions, mining ships with massive cargo capacity, private yachts owned by wealthy colonists, even a converted luxury liner that had been on a tour of the Centauri worlds. Captain John Hai-Jin of the science vessel Relativity brought a team of xenobiologists to help with Galactic medical needs. The mining conglomerate ships Bronze Star and Deep Horizon arrived with industrial-grade radiation shields and evacuation pods designed for asteroid emergencies. The luxury liner Aurora came with a full medical staff and supplies for 10,000. Most surprising was the arrival of the colony ship New Horizon, which had been en route to establish a human settlement on a newly terraformed world. We took a vote among the colonists, explained Captain Oh Junseo. All 3,000 of our people agreed to divert here. We can take at least 15,000 Galactic to the colony site we were heading for. It's not fully developed, but it's habitable for their biology with minor adaptations. The council observers watched in stunned silence as the human fleet, a mismatched collection of vessels with different designs, purposes, and capabilities, coordinated a massive evacuation effort without any central authority directing them. Observer Nilix requested permission to speak directly with Commander Park. When granted, he asked the question that had been troubling him and his fellow observers. These vessels have no obligation to be here. Many are civilian ships with no connection to your military or government. They face potential sanctions and certainly financial loss. Yet they came. Why? Park, who was helping load Galactic children onto an evacuation shuttle, paused before answering. Because that's what humans do. When someone calls for help, we answer. Without orders, without protocols. Sometimes because of the absence of those things. Park gestured to the fleet of human ships visible in the sky above. Every captain here made their own choice. That's the human factor your council doesn't understand. We don't always need to be told to do the right thing. The evacuation accelerated beyond what Park had thought possible. The human ships formed a protective network around the remaining Galactic cities, their combined shields creating safe corridors for shuttle flights. Crews worked in rotation, catching sleep where and when they could, often volunteering for double shifts despite the dangers. Captain Song of the New Seoul worked alongside his crew to convert every available space into transport capacity. When Park visited his ship, he found Song personally helping Galactic families settle into makeshift quarters. My grandparents were refugees from the Korean coastal flooding, Song explained when Park asked why he'd come. Someone helped them when they had nothing. Some debts can only be paid forward. Each human ship had a similar story. The captain of the Aurora had lost family in a space station accident when help arrived too late. The science team on the Relativity believed knowledge should be preserved at all costs and worked frantically to download Galactic cultural archives. The mining ship's crews simply shrugged and said, "Seemed like the right thing to do." Elder Toll observed these humans with growing fascination. The Galactic had been told humans were dangerous because of their emotions, their impulsiveness. Now he understood that these same traits made them uniquely capable of extraordinary action when circumstances demanded it. Your people work without rest, he commented to Park as they coordinated the evacuation of a hospital. Without guarantee of reward or recognition. Park smiled tiredly. Sometimes being human means being stubborn in the face of impossible odds. We don't like being told something can't be done. As the 18th hour since the arrival of the New Seoul came to a close, the radiation sensors suddenly spiked across all monitoring stations. Another massive solar flare was building, this one potentially catastrophic. The Council observation vessels immediately began preparing to depart the system. Observer Nilix, however, hesitated. For the first time in his long career, he found himself questioning the wisdom of non-interference. Below on the planet, humans and Galendri worked side by side, racing against time itself. Evacuation numbers rose hour by hour. 500,000, 800,000, 1 million. Still not enough, but far more than anyone had believed possible. And across the stars, more human ships were altering course, responding to a call that spoke not to their orders or their obligations, but to something more fundamental, a quality that the Council species had perhaps forgotten in their long ages of cautious existence. The Galendri would remember it forever as the time when only the angry humans answered their call. The final day of the Galendri evacuation arrived with the sky turned blood red. The dying sun had swollen to fill nearly a quarter of the visible horizon, its surface roiling with massive flares and prominences. Sensors across the human fleet registered radiation levels approaching lethal thresholds even through their combined shielding. Commander Park stood in the hastily assembled control center within the last remaining evacuation zone. Around him, human and Galendri technicians worked with grim determination, coordinating the final desperate push to save as many as possible. "Status report," Park called out, his voice hoarse from days of breathing filtered air laden with metallic particles. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her monitoring station. "We've evacuated just over 3 million Galendri. The final shuttles are being loaded now. Remaining population in the safe zone is approximately 200,000. Park closed his eyes briefly. 5 million left behind. The number weighed on him like a physical burden. "Commander," a junior officer called urgently. "The planetary crust is showing signs of instability. Seismic activity increasing exponentially." On the large display screen, red warning indicators flashed across the Galendri homeworld map. What had been predicted to take weeks was happening now. The planet was beginning to break apart under the gravitational stress from its expanding star. Park activated the emergency broadcast. "All personnel, this is Commander Park. Begin immediate final evacuation. I repeat, immediate final evacuation. We have less than 2 hours." The human fleet responded with practiced efficiency. Every available shuttle, cargo pod, and escape craft descended toward the surface. The evacuation plan they had carefully developed over weeks now compressed into a desperate race against planetary collapse. On the Council observation vessel, Observer Nilix watched with a mixture of scientific fascination and something unfamiliar, an emotion his species rarely acknowledge: regret. "The human efforts will fail," noted his second-in-command dispassionately. "They cannot evacuate the remaining population before planetary breakup." Nilix said nothing, continuing to watch as the small fleet of human ships maneuvered with what appeared to be reckless abandon, pushing atmospheric entry velocities beyond safe parameters, risking their own vessels to reach the surface one more time. After several minutes of silence, Nilix made a decision that would change his career, and perhaps the Council itself. "Prepare our auxiliary craft for launch," he ordered. "Observer Nilix, that would constitute direct intervention." "Council protocols clearly." "I am aware of protocols," Nilix interrupted. "I am invoking emergency override Alpha 7. Log my decision as a violation if you must." On the surface, Park supervised the loading of the final shuttles. Children and cultural knowledge keepers were prioritized, with adults being selected by lottery for the remaining spots. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the planet's core destabilized. A Galendri approached Park, not Elder Toll, but an ordinary citizen whose light patterns showed deep distress. "My children are on the last transport," the Galendri said through the translator. "But there is no room for me." Park looked at the frightened being, crystalline structure glinting in the red light. "What is your name?" "Ren. I am, was, the teacher of history." Park immediately tapped his communicator. "Lieutenant Kim, remove my name from the final shuttle manifest. Give my spot to a Galendri historian named Ren." "Commander." Kim began to protest. "That's an order, Lieutenant. History should have a witness." As Ren was escorted to the shuttle, Park continued his work, knowing he had likely just sacrificed his own survival. Around him, other human crew members were making similar decisions, quietly removing themselves from evacuation lists to make room for more Galendry. The ground shook violently, knocking several people off their feet. "Final warning," called out the geological officer. "Major tectonic shift imminent. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 18 minutes. The last shuttle was nearly full when 3 sleek craft of obvious alien design descended through the atmospheric turbulence, landing with precision in the evacuation zone. Observer Nilix emerged, accompanied by several Council species representatives. "Commander Park," Nilix said, approaching quickly, "we have space for approximately 60 additional evacuees on each vessel." Park stared in shock. "You're violating your own non-interference directive." "Yes." Nilix nodded once, sharply. "An oversight committee will undoubtedly censure me upon our return. However, I find myself unwilling to merely observe any longer." As the Council vessels loaded their unexpected passengers, Park received an urgent communication from Captain Song of the New Soul. "Commander, we've detected a massive solar prominence forming. If it detaches, which our science officer says is likely within the hour, the resulting flare will engulf the planet's orbit completely." "Understood. Get your ship to safe distance once your shuttles return." "What about you, Commander?" Park looked around at the few dozen humans and Galendry who remained, all of whom had given up their evacuation spots for others. "We'll take the Dauntless. One last run." The final minutes blurred together as the remaining personnel boarded the damaged Dauntless. The ship, never designed for planetary landing, groaned under the stress as Park piloted it manually from the surface. Behind them, massive fissures opened in the crystalline landscape, ancient structures toppling as the planet began its final death throes. "Shield integrity at 15%, reported the engineering officer as they climbed through the turbulent atmosphere. "Hull breaches detected on decks 3 and 7. Seal those sections and divert all power to engines," Park ordered. "We just need to reach minimum safe distance." Through the view screen, they watched as the first pieces of the Galendry homeworld broke away, glittering fragments spinning off into space like tears from a shattered eye. The human fleet, accompanied by the 3 Council vessels, formed up at the designated rendezvous point, just as the massive solar flare observer Nilix had predicted erupted from the dying star. The combined ships, 19 human vessels of various sizes and purposes, 3 Council observation craft, and over 100 Galendry evacuation ships, accelerated away from the doomed system. No one spoke as they watched the final destruction on long-range sensors. The Galendry homeworld, with its billion-year history and all its remaining life, broke apart under the gravitational stress before being engulfed by the stellar flare. 3 days later, when the refugee fleet had reached relative safety, a gathering was called aboard the largest Galendry vessel. Representatives from each ship attended, human captains and officers, Council observers, and the Galendry leadership. Elder Toll, looking somehow diminished without the light of his homeworld reflecting from his crystalline form, addressed the assembly. "We have lost our world," he began, his translator conveying the deep emotion carried in his light patterns. "But because of you, our people survive. 3,217,465 Galendry live when we should all have perished." He turned to face the human delegation. "The Council called your species angry and warned us of your emotional instability. Now we understand. Your anger is not destructive. It's the fierce refusal to accept suffering when you can prevent it." Observer Nilix stepped forward. "I have transmitted my report to the Council. I have recommended a full review of our non-interference protocols in light of what I have witnessed here." "Will they listen?" Park asked. "Perhaps not immediately. Change comes slowly to species who measure their civilization in millennia rather than centuries. But they will not be able to ignore the facts I have presented." In the months that followed, The human and Galendry ships traveled together toward Earth-controlled space. The colony ship New Horizon offered its intended planet to the Galendry, its human colonists choosing to delay their own settlement to help establish a new home for the refugees. Earth Command, faced with the fait accompli of 3 million refugees and widespread public support for the rescue mission, grudgingly rescinded their threats of court-martial. The official record described the mission as an unauthorized, but ultimately humanitarian intervention. 1 year after the destruction of their homeworld, the Galendry established their first colony. They named the capital Park's Promise over the commander's embarrassed objections. The crystal structures they built captured and reflected light in patterns that reminded them of their lost world, while incorporating elements of human design, a blending of two species aesthetics. Throughout the galaxy, the story spread. Many council species dismissed it as human exaggeration or sentimentality, but others began to question long-held assumptions about their younger galactic neighbors. Angry humans gradually transformed from an insult into a term of respect in some circles, those who act when others merely observe. 5 years later, during the formal alliance ceremony between humans and Galendry, an elderly council member who had reviewed Observer Nelix's records asked Commander Park, now Admiral Park, why humans alone had answered the call when so many advanced species had refused. Park looked out at the assembled delegates, including many from species that had once dismissed humanity as too emotional, too impulsive, too angry to be trusted with significant galactic responsibilities. Because we still remember what it means to be afraid, Park replied simply. And we still believe in the duty to help. The Galendry representative, a young leader whose light patterns shimmered with complex emotion, added, "We have studied human history since our rescue. Your species has known suffering, has inflicted suffering, has overcome suffering. Perhaps this is why you recognized our need when others saw only data." The alliance between humans and Galendry became the foundation for a gradual shift in galactic politics. Other younger species, previously marginalized by the ancient council powers, began to form their own cooperative agreements. The council itself, influenced by Observer Nelix's continued advocacy, eventually revised its non-interference protocols to allow intervention in extinction-level events. Decades later, when other civilizations faced their own catastrophes, they would no longer broadcast their distress calls to an indifferent galaxy. Instead, they specifically requested the angry humans, who had once saved an entire species, simply because they could not bear to watch them die. And somewhere in the vast archives of the Galactic Council, a simple notation was added to the file on humanity. Anger, in this species, may be a virtue we have forgotten.